Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I am sharing with you guys my favorite drugstore face brushes. I've done eye brushes, now I'm going to do face brushes. And 99% of these brushes are going to be Real Techniques because I really like Real Techniques brushes. Some Eco Tools, a few Wet n Wild thrown in. Most of them are Real Techniques. I'm going to go in the order that I apply my makeup. So foundation would be Real Techniques sponge. This is not a surprise. Everybody loves this thing. It's actually time for me to replace mine because it's kind of starting to fall apart. But this is my all-time favorite. I have never used the name brand beauty blender, and I'm not going to because this works perfectly fine. It's amazing. I'm not going to go out and spend $20 just to see what the hype is and then not like it. So definitely recommend this. I would recommend getting the 4-pack because it's like 18 bucks for 4 instead of paying like $7 or $8 for 1. So definitely get the 4-pack. Next is concealer. Most of the time I will use the sponge, but if I do use a concealer brush, the Real Techniques pointed foundation brush is my favorite, especially for under my eyes, because it's like the perfect shape just to get in there, and it's small, it's detailed. You can use it for even like on blemishes, so like anything down here, you can just, it's small enough for detail, big enough for like under your eyes. So this is an amazing brush. I just love it. Let's see. If I ever do cream contouring, which I never do, again, it would be with this. If I use anything cream, I use my sponge to blend it out. For powder, I have 2 brushes that I like. I have the, I don't know what this is called, but this is the Real Techniques. I think it's just a powder brush, and this is a really big, really fluffy powder brush. As you can see, it is really big. And if you guys are curious, you can get these brushes in sets. Like the colors match up with the set you can get them in. So like these brushes are all the same color. I think these like face brushes come in 2 different sets. But here is the powder brush. This is my favorite powder brush for just anything that has any coverage. If I'm using translucent powder, I'll use the Revlon powder brush because it's a lot more flimsy. As you can see, it's way more flimsy, less dense. They're both about the same level of softness, so I really like them. You can see the size difference of them on my face. Let's see. For blush, I have typically 3 different blush brushes that I like to use. If I'm using a powder blush that is very pigmented and I just want like a light wash of color and I don't want to get carried away, I will use the Real Techniques blush brush. I'm not the biggest fan of this shape just because it is really rather large and it's kind of like, it's really long and flimsy. It's just an awkward shape to, you know, but it is really good for highly pigmented powder blushes that you want to just like wisp on your face and you don't want to get carried away with the color. My favorite blush brush for cream blushes is the Revlon blush brush. I will just like swirl this in the cream, apply it, and then kind of just like buff it out. So I really like the Revlon brush. Goes over here. And another one is my Eco Tools. It says mattifying finish. I don't know how you can make a brush mattifying finish because I can use it with a dewy product and then it won't be it won't be a mattifying finish brush. It'll be a dewy finish brush. But I like the mattifying finish brush for kind of stiffer blushes that are harder to get at. Example being the blush right here in the Chrissy Teigen Becca palette. It's very, like if I touch it with my finger, you don't really get that much pigment off of it. So I like this for harder pressed blushes, even though it is a little bit flimsy. It works really good with hard pressed blushes. I don't know how many times I'm going to say that. Let's see. I forgot to mention, for other powders, I do like the Real Techniques buffing brush. This one's also good for foundation. This is a really good, just any use you want to use it for brush. And then the Real Techniques multitask brush I specifically like for like under the eye powders or just like setting my T-zone. Let's see. For contouring slash bronzing, I have two brushes here that I like to use. This is the Wet n Wild contour brush. I'm not sure specifically what this brush is, but it looks like this. I use this for contouring. And this one also, this is the Real Techniques contour brush. This is one of my favorites. I used this one for bronzing today, so this one's really good for anything you want to use it for. Let's see. For highlighting, I don't like using highlighter brushes. Not highlighter brushes, fan brushes. I don't know why, I just don't. So I like to use the Real Techniques stippling brush. Looks like this, just because it kind of feathers out the highlight that you put out. I don't know why it works for highlighting, it just does for me. But yeah, I really like this one. And also, if I want like a really precise highlight, I will use the Real Techniques foundation brush. I hate these brushes for actual foundation. I don't know why anybody thought this was a good idea to use for foundation. It just leaves everything so streaky. I just don't like it. But it's really good for highlighting, especially like down the center of my nose, because sometimes if I use this, it makes the highlight on my nose too wide, so it makes my nose look a lot bigger than it is. So I will use this just down the bridge of my nose, over my lip, on my chin. So it's really good for highlighting. Let me see if I'm missing anything else. This is a good brush for foundation also. It's a little bit smaller, so it takes a little bit more work, but this is the Real Techniques Expert Face Brush. Looks like that. I find this really good for thicker foundations that you can only work in smaller areas. I'm trying to think of what I'm trying to say. Thicker foundations that when you apply them, they kind of stay where they're at, so you kind of want to just work in little sections. So like, do this part, buff it out, do this, buff it out, you know, just, I really like this brush for that. Another good foundation brush is the Wet n Wild flat top brush if you're just looking for a cheap foundation brush. I think this is like $2 or $3. This personally is not my first choice, but I mean, if it works what it's supposed to do, because when I use it, this is how it starts out, but then when you actually start buffing around your face, it spreads out and it stays spread out, so it doesn't keep its shape, and it absorbs a lot of product. As you can see, there's a lot of product in there, but it is a good brush. It does what it's supposed to do. It's just not my first choice if you were looking for something cheaper. Another good concealer brush that is also not my first choice, but it's just something else if you wanted to have another option, the EcoTools Eye Perfecting Brush. Looks like this. Use this underneath, all over, whatever you want to do. I find it too dense, and it doesn't really, even though the bristles are soft, if you're trying to like target or just like spread out in a little area, it doesn't really, it gets a little rough, and I don't really like it all that much. I have this one. I don't have a brand for it, but it's just another example of a flat top face brush that I like to use. It just says blending brush. I think it's probably from like a cheap brush kit, but I've had this one for a very long time. This is an example of one that's too flimsy, not dense enough. So yeah, that was my favorite face brushes. I hope I gave you guys some ideas. If you just want something cheap, something that works, I would definitely go with the Wet n Wild brushes. I don't have every single one of their face brushes. I would stay away from their fan brush because the bristles are practically complete plastic. So I would definitely stay away from that if you can. All of their other brushes I would definitely recommend. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Hope this was helpful. Give this a thumbs up if you enjoyed. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button for more, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye.